I never thought I'd end up working on a fishing boat. 3 months ago, I was sitting in a cubicle in Seattle, watching the rain streak down floor-to-ceiling windows, answering emails that didn't matter about meetings that could have been emails. My therapist kept asking me what I wanted, and I kept giving her the same blank stare I gave my computer screen every morning. The truth was, I didn't know what I wanted. I just knew it wasn't this. Then my uncle called. Uncle Ray, my mum's brother, the one who never settled down, never had kids, just worked the fishing boats up and down the Pacific coast. He needed crew for the summer season. Good pay, hard work, no experience necessary. I laughed at first. Me? On a fishing boat? I got seasick on the ferry to Bainbridge Island. But that night, lying in my apartment that cost too much and felt too empty, I kept thinking about it. About the ocean. About doing something with my hands instead of just typing. About being anywhere but here. So I quit. Just walked into my manager's office on a Tuesday morning and said I was done. The look on his face was almost worth the years of boredom alone. 2 weeks later, I was in Astoria, Oregon, standing on a dock at 5 a.m, watching the sunrise turn the Columbia River into liquid gold, wondering what the hell I'd just done with my life. That's when I met him. Crew was already loading gear onto the Miss Marie, this weathered trawler that looked like it had seen better decades. I was standing there with my duffel bag trying to look like I knew what I was doing, when someone called out behind me, "You must be the greenhorn." I turned around, and there he was. Salt-stained t-shirt, faded jeans, work boots that had actually seen work. Dark hair pulled back in a bun, a few days of stubble, and these eyes, Jesus, these eyes that were somewhere between grey and green, like the ocean on an overcast day. He was wiping his hands on a rag, looking me up and down with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm Marcus," I said, extending my hand. He looked at it for a second, then gripped it firmly. His palm was rough with calluses. "Finn," he said. "I'm the deckhand, which means I'm the one who's going to be keeping your ass from going overboard for the next few months." He almost smiled. Almost. "Welcome aboard." Those first few days were brutal. Everything hurt. My hands blistered, then the blisters popped, then they blistered again. My back felt like someone had taken a hammer to my spine. I learned the difference between a bowline and a clove hitch, learned to read the weather in the colour of the sky, learned that the ocean doesn't care about your feelings or your college degree or the fact that you're pretty sure you're about to throw up everything you've ever eaten. Finn was patient, though. More patient than I expected. He'd show me how to do something once, maybe twice, then let me figure it out. When I screwed up, which was constantly, he'd just shake his head and demonstrate again. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his voice had this rough quality to it, like gravel rolling in waves. The crew was small. Captain Ray, my uncle, who ran the boat with the quiet authority of someone who'd been doing this for 40 years. Eddie, the engineer, who was probably in his 60s and told the same 5 stories on rotation, and then Finn and me. That was it. 4 men in close quarters, heading out for days at a time to chase salmon and halibut and whatever else was running. The sleeping arrangements were tight. Captain had his cabin, Eddie had his, and Finn and I were supposed to share the forecastle, this cramped space in the bow with 2 narrow bunks. But there was also the hammock. Someone, probably decades ago, had strung up this heavy canvas hammock in a corner of the deck that was partially covered, protected from the worst of the weather, but still open to the air. Finn slept there most nights. "Bunks are too stuffy," he explained on our 3rd night out when I asked him about it. We were sitting on the deck after dinner, the sun setting somewhere behind the clouds, turning everything purple and orange. "And I like feeling the boat move. It's honest out here." I didn't really understand what he meant then, but I was starting to. There was something about being on the water, about feeling the swell beneath you, the constant motion that became its own kind of stillness. It was honest, no pretending. The ocean didn't care who you were or what you wanted to be, it just was. By the end of the first week, I could tie the basic knots without thinking. By the end of the second, I could read the hydraulics on the winch. By the end of the third, I realised I hadn't thought about my old job, my old life, my old self in days. I was too tired, too focused, too present. My body was changing, getting harder, stronger. My hands were permanently stained with fish blood and salt, and I was sleeping better than I had in years. It was the start of the 4th week when the weather turned. We'd been having it easy, Captain said. Unusually calm seas for June, but that couldn't last. The storm rolled in from the northwest, and suddenly the swells were 8 feet, 10 feet, the Miss Marie pitching and rolling like a carnival ride designed by someone cruel. I was terrified. Eddie was in the engine room, keeping everything running. Captain was in the wheelhouse, fighting to keep us pointed into the waves, and Finn was everywhere, checking lines, securing gear, moving across the heaving deck like he'd been born with sea legs. "Get below," he shouted at me over the wind. "Nothing for you to do up here." But I couldn't. Not because I was brave, but because I was frozen. I'd been trying to secure one of the fish boxes when a wave hit, and suddenly I was on my arse sliding toward the rail, salt water in my mouth and eyes, the deck tilting at an impossible angle. Then Finn was there, his hand locked around my wrist, hauling me back, pulling me against him as another wave crashed over the bow. We were both soaked, both gasping. He dragged me toward the partial shelter where the hammock was strung, pushed me down to sit on the deck with my back against the bulkhead. "Stay here," he said, his face inches from mine. "Don't move, you understand?" I nodded. He held my eyes for another second, then he was gone again, back into the storm. I don't know how long I sat there. Hours, maybe. The boat rose and fell, rose and fell. I could hear the wind screaming, the waves slamming against the hull, the engine grinding. Every time Finn passed by, checking on me, I felt this weird mix of shame and relief. Shame that I was useless, relief that he kept coming back. Finally, the storm started to ease. The swells got smaller. The wind dropped from a scream to a howl to a moan. Captain's voice came over the radio, telling us to secure everything and get some rest. Eddie stumbled up from the engine room looking like he'd aged 10 years. Finn finished tying down the last of the gear, then collapsed next to me against the bulkhead. We sat there in silence, both soaked, both exhausted. The hammock swayed gently above us, somehow still intact. "Hell of a first storm," Finn said finally. "I was useless," I said. "I'm sorry." He turned to look at me. His hair had come loose from the bun, hanging in wet tangles around his face. "You stayed alive. That's not useless." "I just sat here." "Yeah, you did what I told you. That's more than a lot of greenhorns manage." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "You'll do better next time. They get easier." "Do they?" "No," he admitted. "But you get stronger." That night, after I'd changed into dry clothes and tried to eat some of the soup Eddie had made, I couldn't sleep in my bunk. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the boat sliding out from under me, felt that moment of terror when I thought I was going overboard. I lay there for maybe an hour, listening to the creak of the hull, the slap of waves, my own heartbeat too loud in my ears. Finally, I gave up. I grabbed my blanket and went back out on deck. The storm had passed completely now. The stars were out, more stars than I'd ever seen in my life, the Milky Way a river of light overhead. The air was cold and clean and tasted like salt. Finn was in the hammock. I could see him in silhouette, one arm thrown over his head, apparently asleep. I started to turn back, not wanting to disturb him, but his voice stopped me. "Can't sleep?" "No," I admitted. "You?" "I sleep better out here." He shifted and the hammock swayed. "Storm dreams?" "Something like that." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "First bad storm sticks with you. I still remember mine. Thought the boat was going to break in half. Captain at the time, old bastard named Jim, he just laughed. Said if we made it through I was a real sailor. If we didn't, well, wouldn't matter anyway." "That's comforting." "We made it through." I stood there not sure what to do with myself. The deck was still damp, but I didn't want to go back to the stuffy forecastle. Finally, Finn said, "There's room." "What?" "In the hammock, if you want. It sways less with 2 people, more stable." My heart did something complicated in my chest. "I don't want to crowd you, Marcus." He said my name like it was a fact, not an opinion. "Get in the hammock." So I did. It was awkward at first, trying to figure out how 2 people fit in a space meant for one. But Finn shifted, making room, and I settled in beside him, our shoulders touching, both of us looking up at the stars. The hammock swayed gently with the boat's motion, and he was right. It did feel more stable with both of us in it. "Better?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. And it was true. My heart was still doing that complicated thing, but the fear from earlier was fading, replaced by something else. Something warm and uncertain and terrifying in a completely different way. We didn't talk, just lay there, watching the stars wheel overhead, feeling the boat rock beneath us. At some point I fell asleep, When I woke up a few hours later, the sun was starting to rise, painting the sky pink and gold, and Finn's arm was across my chest, his face turned toward me, still sleeping. I could feel his breath on my neck, slow and steady. I should have moved, should have extracted myself carefully, pretended it hadn't happened. Instead, I stayed still, watching the sunrise, feeling the weight of his arm, the warmth of his body next to mine, and thinking that maybe this was what I'd been looking for all along. Not the ocean, not the boat, not the escape from my old life. This moment, this person. After that night, something shifted between us. Nothing was said, nothing was acknowledged, but it was there. The way Finn's hand would linger on my shoulder when he was showing me a new knot. The way I'd find excuses to work near him on deck. The way we'd end up in the hammock together most nights, sharing body heat, sharing silence, sharing something that didn't have a name yet. The other guys noticed, I think. Eddie made a comment once about us being joined at the hip, and Captain gave me this look that might have been knowing or might have been nothing. But nobody said anything directly. On a boat, you learn to mind your business. We were out for a 10-day trip, chasing a run of Chinook that Captain swore was going to make the season. The days blurred together, all hard work and salt spray and the constant smell of fish. But the nights were mine and Finn's. We'd finish the day's work, eat Eddie's cooking, then head out to the hammock. Sometimes we'd talk, his voice low and rough in the darkness, telling me about growing up in a small town in Alaska, about his dad who'd been a fisherman, about why he'd left and never gone back. Sometimes I'd talk about the cubicle, about the feeling of slowly disappearing, about how out here I felt more real than I had in years. And sometimes we'd just lie there, not talking, our bodies pressed together in the narrow canvas, the hammock swaying with the boat's motion, the stars overhead, and I'd think about how easy it would be to turn my head, to close the distance between us, to see if he wanted what I wanted. But I didn't. Because what if I was wrong? What if I ruined this thing we had, whatever it was? What if he pulled away, and the rest of the season became unbearably awkward, and I had to go back to Seattle with this ache in my chest and nothing to show for it? It was Finn who broke first. We were 8 days into the trip, the holds full of fish, everyone exhausted but satisfied. The weather had been perfect, and we'd hit the run exactly right. One more day and we'd head back to port, sell the catch, have a few days off before heading out again. I was in the hammock waiting for Finn to finish his last check of the deck. The moon was nearly full, bright enough to read by, turning the ocean silver. He climbed in next to me, settling into the space we'd carved out together over the past weeks. But instead of lying on his back like usual, he turned on his side, facing me. I could feel his eyes on my face. "Marcus," he said quietly. "Yeah? Why'd you really come out here? Your uncle needed crew, sure, but you could have said no. Why'd you say yes?" I thought about lying, about giving him the easy answer, but we were past that. "I was disappearing," I said. "Back in Seattle. I'd wake up and go to work and come home and go to sleep and none of it meant anything. I felt like I was fading away, like if I didn't do something drastic, I'd just stop existing altogether. And now? Now I feel real," I said. "Like I'm actually living my life instead of watching it happen to someone else." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I came out here for the same reason. Different city, different life, but same feeling. Like I was drowning on dry land." "What were you running from?" "Myself, mostly." His voice was rough. "Trying to be something I wasn't. Trying to fit into a shape that didn't match my edges. Out here, I don't have to pretend." My heart was pounding now. "Pretend what?" He reached up, his calloused fingers brushing my cheek, and I stopped breathing. "That I don't want this," he said. "That I don't think about you every second of every day. That sharing this hammock with you isn't the best part of my life." I didn't think. I just moved, closing the distance between us, pressing my lips to his. He made this sound, half surprise, half relief, and then he was kissing me back, his hand sliding into my hair, pulling me closer. The hammock swayed wildly with our movement, and neither of us cared. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he said. "Why didn't you?" "Same reason you didn't. Scared." "And now?" "Still scared," he admitted, but more scared of not doing it. We kissed again, slower this time, learning the shape of each other's mouths, the taste of salt and coffee and something underneath that was just him. His hands were careful on my body, like I was something precious that might break. I pulled him closer, trying to communicate without words that I wouldn't break, that I wanted this, that I'd been wanting this since that first storm when he'd pulled me back from the edge. We didn't sleep much that night, just held each other, kissed, talked in whispers about all the things we'd been too afraid to say, about what this meant, about what happened when we got back to port, about whether this was just a boat thing or something more. Neither of us had answers, but somehow that was okay. We had time to figure it out. When the sun came up, we were still tangled together in the hammock, and Eddie's voice calling us for breakfast made us both laugh. We climbed out, stiff and tired and happier than I'd been in years. Finn caught my hand before we went inside, squeezed it once, and the look he gave me made my chest tight with something that felt a lot like hope. The last day of the trip, we worked side by side and everything felt different. Better. Like the world had shifted into sharper focus. Captain definitely knew something was up because he kept giving us these looks, but he didn't say anything, just smiled into his coffee. When we finally docked back in Astoria, tired and smelling like fish, Finn helped me unload my gear. "So," he said, "we've got 3 days before the next trip. What are you going to do with them?" "I don't know," I said. "What are you going to do?" He grinned and it transformed his whole face. "I was thinking about finding a hotel room with a real bed, maybe convincing a certain greenhorn to share it with me. You know, because it sways less that way." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. That sounds perfect, and it was. We spent those 3 days together, barely leaving the hotel room, learning each other in ways we couldn't on the boat. And when it was time to head back out, we went together, climbing back aboard the Miss Marie, back to the work and the salt and the endless ocean. The hammock's still there, still swaying in the wind. We still sleep in it most nights, pressed together, watching the stars, feeling the boat rock beneath us. And every time someone asks why we share it, Finn just shrugs and says it sways less that way. Which is true, as far as it goes. But the real truth is simpler. I sleep there because that's where he is. And he sleeps there because that's where I am. And out here on the water, under the stars, with the ocean honest and endless around us, that's all the reason we need.